Under the relentless rain, Clara Evans, an exhausted florist, accidentally collided with a stranger while rushing to deliver a bouquet from her shop. She didn't realize the man was Ethan Parker, her childhood best friend, now a self-made tech entrepreneur. As they reconnected, long-buried memories resurfaced, reigniting a bond they thought had been forgotten. However, Ethan's hidden wealth and Clara's financial struggles created barriers that threatened their fragile reconnection. Could honesty, love, and resilience bridge the gap between their vastly different worlds? Hi everyone, welcome to Vidy's story. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. The rain poured down in unrelenting sheets, turning the streets of Willowhaven into a maze of glistening puddles and shimmering reflections. Clara Evans, a florist in her late 20s, clutched a bouquet of daisies close to her chest, desperate to keep them dry. The flowers were for a special customer, and Clara couldn't afford to lose the order. Not with rent looming and bills piling up. Her sneakers splashed through shallow pools as she weaved through the crowded sidewalks. Muttering apologies to strangers she brushed past. She glanced at her watch, anxiety bubbling up. Time was running out. Then, as she turned a corner too sharply, it happened. Clara collided with someone, the force sending her bouquet tumbling to the rain-slicked ground. "Oh no!" she gasped, dropping to her knees, her fingers scrambling to gather the drenched flowers. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking." "Clara?" The voice was warm, almost incredulous, and startlingly familiar. She froze, her hands still hovering over the scattered daisies. Slowly, she looked up, meeting a pair of eyes she hadn't seen in years. Ethan Parker, the boy she used to spend every summer with in Crestford, chasing fireflies and daring each other to climb the tallest trees. But the boy she remembered was gone. Ethan stood there, tall and polished, his tailored coat and leather shoes stark against the damp chaos of the street. His hair was neatly styled, and there was a confidence in his posture that felt foreign. For a moment, Clara couldn't reconcile the man before her with the mischievous boy from her memories. "It's really you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's lips curved into a soft smile. "I can't believe it either. It's been, 15 years? "More like 17, she replied, standing and brushing rainwater from her coat. She glanced at the bouquet in her hands, now wilted and soaked, and sighed. "Some things haven't changed. I'm still a mess." Ethan chuckled, the sound rich and genuine, though his gaze lingered on her a second longer than necessary. "And some things have," he said, his voice carrying a note of nostalgia. Clara couldn't help but notice the subtle air of distance around him. The way his polished demeanor seemed so far removed from the scrappy, carefree boy she once knew. She adjusted the bouquet in her arms, forcing a smile. "Well, it's nice seeing you again, Ethan. I should." Before she could finish, her phone buzzed loudly in her pocket, a sharp reminder of her impending delivery. "I have to go," she said quickly, taking a step back. "These flowers aren't going to deliver themselves." Ethan hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Where's your shop? Maybe I'll stop by sometime." "Petal and Vine, just down on Maple," she said, her voice polite but guarded. "Take care, Ethan." With that, Clara hurried off into the rain, clutching her battered bouquet. As she disappeared into the crowd, Ethan remained rooted to the spot, his thoughts swirling. Seeing Clara again stirred something deep within him. Memories, emotions, and a longing he hadn't felt in years. For Clara, the encounter left her unsettled. She couldn't shake the feeling that while Ethan had climbed to new heights, he'd left their shared past far behind. As the rain fell harder, both of them found themselves wondering if the connection they'd once had could ever be rekindled. The next morning, as Clara arranged an array of lilies and tulips in the front window of her flower shop, the soft chime of the bell above the door caught her attention. She turned, a practiced smile already on her face, but her breath hitched when she saw who it was. "Good morning," Ethan said, his voice warm and casual, as though this were perfectly normal. He stood there, a bouquet of fresh daisies in his hands, looking almost sheepish. "Ethan," Clara said, surprised, "what are you doing here?" I figured I owed you an apology for yesterday, he replied, setting the bouquet on the counter. I may have ruined your delivery. Clara blinked, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. These are from my own stock. He grinned, not missing a beat. Well, I thought you deserved to enjoy them for once. Do you ever stop and smell the flowers you sell? Despite herself, Clara laughed softly, shaking her head. You always did have a way with words. Over the next week, Ethan began dropping by more often. Each time, he'd buy a modest bouquet, roses one day, sunflowers the next. Clara teased him about his newfound love of flowers, but Ethan always deflected with a charming excuse. What can I say? Your shop is the most cheerful place I've seen in a long time, he said one day, watching as Clara carefully wrapped a bundle of carnations in brown paper. Clara chuckled. You could have just said you like flowers, Ethan. I wouldn't judge. But as the days passed, it became clear to Clara that his visits weren't just about flowers. They began talking, hesitantly at first, about Crestford, the sleepy little town they both used to call home. Do you remember that old oak tree by the creek? Ethan asked one afternoon, leaning against the counter. The one we used to climb until your mom yelled at us for ruining our clothes? Clara laughed, the sound light and genuine. I remember you falling out of it and spraining your wrist. You blamed me because I dared you to go higher. And you bribed me with caramel candies so I wouldn't tell your mom, Ethan added, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Their conversations stretched longer with each visit, and Clara found herself relaxing around him in a way she hadn't expected. They talked about chasing fireflies on summer nights, daring each other to jump into the freezing creek, and racing bikes down the dirt roads of Crestford. It feels like a lifetime ago, Clara said one evening, her voice tinged with wistfulness. For me, it feels like yesterday, Ethan replied softly. But beneath the easy banter and shared memories, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was holding something back. His polished demeanor and the way he sometimes hesitated before speaking hinted at a life more complicated than he let on. And while Ethan cherished these moments with Clara, he couldn't ignore the pull of his two worlds, the simple, grounded connection he felt with her and the fast-paced, high-stakes life he'd built far away from Crestford. For now, though, both seemed content to linger in the in-between, reliving the past and pretending the future wasn't waiting just outside the flower shop's doors. A week after his visits to the shop became routine, Ethan stepped through the doors of Petal and Vine with a new purpose. He approached the counter where Clara was delicately arranging peonies into a vase. Clara, he began, his tone warm but hesitant, I'd like to take you out to dinner, as a thank you for letting me monopolize your time lately. Clara raised an eyebrow, amused. Dinner? Are you sure you're not just looking for another excuse to buy flowers? Ethan chuckled. I'm serious. It's just dinner, I promise. Against her better judgment, Clara agreed. That evening, he picked her up in a sleek black car that looked as out of place in Willowhaven as a diamond in a thrift store. Clara hesitated as she slid into the passenger seat, already feeling a hint of unease. When they arrived at the restaurant, her unease deepened. The place was opulent, soft lighting from crystal chandeliers, the hum of refined conversation, and polished waitstaff moving with quiet efficiency. Clara felt like a fish out of water in her modest dress, while Ethan seemed perfectly at home in his tailored suit. You didn't mention this place was fancy, Clara murmured as they were shown to their table near the window, overlooking the glittering city skyline. Ethan smiled, brushing off her concern. It's just dinner, Clara. Relax. For a while, the evening felt almost normal. They talked about Crestford, laughed about old memories, and shared stories about their present lives. But Clara couldn't ignore the way heads turned when Ethan entered the room, or how the waitstaff seemed to know him by name. Halfway through the meal, the truth came crashing down. A man in an expensive suit approached their table, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. Ethan Parker. I didn't expect to see you here, the man said with a broad grin. He glanced at Clara and added, And who's this lovely lady? Clara Evans, Ethan said, his voice tight, but Clara barely heard him. The man laughed, clearly oblivious to the tension brewing. Ethan, You didn't tell me you were bringing a date to celebrate your latest acquisition. A genius in the tech world and a charmer, too. Clara froze, her fork suspended in midair. Tech world? Acquisition? The man, noticing her confusion, chuckled. Oh, Ethan's being modest as always. Parker Technologies is a household name these days. He just closed a deal worth millions. Ethan's face darkened. Richard, maybe we should. But the damage was done. Richard excused himself with a cheery wave, leaving Clara staring at Ethan, her heart sinking. Millions, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara, I can explain, Ethan said quickly, his tone pleading. Explain what? That you've been pretending to be just like me while living a life I can't even imagine? Clara's voice was sharp now, each word laced with hurt. Why didn't you tell me, Ethan? Did you think I'd never find out? It wasn't like that, Ethan insisted, leaning forward. I didn't want my money to change things between us. I didn't want to lose you. Clara pushed her chair back abruptly, the sound grating against the polished floor. You already did, Ethan. You didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. And now? I don't even know who you are. Ignoring Ethan's attempts to stop her, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the restaurant. The cold night air hit her like a slap, but it was nothing compared to the whirlwind of emotions tearing through her chest. Ethan remained seated for a moment, his hands clenched into fists on the table. The truth he'd tried so hard to avoid had come out, and now he'd lost the one person who made him feel like more than just a name on a contract. For Clara, the glittering city skyline felt dim and distant as she walked away, tears mixing with the rain. She couldn't shake the image of the boy she used to know, now replaced by a man she didn't recognize. For the first time since their paths crossed again, she wished they hadn't. The days following the disastrous dinner felt heavy for both Ethan and Clara. Ethan spent countless hours replaying their argument, his chest tight with regret. He knew he had hurt her, but more than anything, he hated that he had made her feel small, like she didn't belong in his world. Clara, on the other hand, threw herself into her work at Petal and Vine, finding solace in the familiarity of her flowers. Yet, no matter how hard she tried, Ethan lingered in her mind. She couldn't reconcile the boy who used to share candy with her during lazy summer afternoons with the man who had hidden so much of himself from her. One afternoon, as Clara was balancing her accounts at the back of her shop, she noticed something strange. A letter from her landlord had arrived, but instead of another warning about overdue rent, it was a receipt. Paid in full. Her heart raced. This wasn't possible. She hadn't caught up yet. Frantically, she called the landlord. Are you sure this isn't a mistake? She asked, gripping the phone tightly. No mistake, came the reply. Someone paid it off for you. Anonymous donor. Clara's stomach twisted. She didn't need to guess who it was. She hung up, her emotions swirling between gratitude and frustration. Later that week, a stranger walked into her shop, holding an envelope. Ms. Evans, he asked politely. Yes? This is for you. He handed her the envelope and left before she could ask questions. Inside was a neatly folded letter and a glossy invitation. The letter read, Clara, I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect forgiveness, but you've always deserved more recognition than you've given yourself credit for. You've poured so much of your heart into your flowers. It's time the world sees it too. Ethan. The invitation was to a floral exhibition, an event she hadn't heard about but now realized was featuring her work. Clara's breath caught. Her floral arrangements, some of which she thought were only appreciated by her small circle of customers, were going to be displayed. On the evening of the exhibition, Clara hesitated outside the venue. The glass doors shimmered under soft lights, and through them, she could see elegant displays of her work. Wildflower bouquets, intricate centerpieces, and cascading arrangements she had designed in quiet moments of creativity. Inside, she found a modest card at each display that read, designed by Clara Evans, owner of Petal and Vine. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and vulnerability. Ethan had done this, not to show off or flaunt his wealth, but to uplift her in a way that made her talent shine. It wasn't about him. It was about her. Toward the end of the evening, She spotted him standing in a corner, watching her quietly. He didn't approach, didn't demand her attention, just observed as she interacted with the guests, admiring her work. Clara finally walked over, her hands clutching her bag tightly. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I wanted to," Ethan replied, his tone sincere. "You've worked so hard, Clara. You deserve to be seen." Her emotions churned, but for the first time, she saw no arrogance in his gesture, no condescension, only genuine care. She looked around at the room filled with people appreciating her art, her craft, her passion. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan said. "I just needed you to know how much I believe in you." As the night wore on, Clara's conflict began to ease. While she wasn't ready to let Ethan back into her life completely, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his actions. For the first time in weeks, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, the man Ethan had become wasn't so far removed from the boy she once trusted. The thought lingered as she walked home that night, her mind caught between gratitude and cautious hope. Maybe healing didn't come all at once. Maybe it started with small steps, like a letter, a paid bill, and a room full of flowers. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over Willowhaven Park. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. Clara sat on a worn wooden bench near the old oak tree, her hands nervously clasped in her lap. She hadn't been here in years, not since she was a child. And yet, when Ethan had asked her to meet him, this was the place he chose, a piece of their shared past. Clara spotted him before he saw her. Ethan was standing by the creek, his hands stuffed into his coat pockets, his posture tense. He looked different here, less polished, more human. For a moment, she hesitated. Her heart told her to stay, but her mind warned her of the hurt he'd caused. Ethan turned, and their eyes met. He smiled faintly, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. "You came," he said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and apprehension. "You asked," Clara replied, her tone guarded but not unkind. They sat together on the bench, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. Clara glanced at the oak tree, its branches sprawling like arms reaching for the sky. "We used to spend hours here," she said softly, climbing that tree, daring each other to go higher. Ethan chuckled lightly, though his gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "You always won. I was terrified, but you never let me back down." The nostalgia hung between them, bittersweet. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. "Clara, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said a long time ago." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I'm listening." He took a deep breath, his voice low and steady. "I didn't hide my life from you because I was ashamed of it. I hid it because I was scared. Scared of how it might change things between us." Clara raised an eyebrow, her skepticism clear. "You didn't think I could handle it?" "It wasn't that," Ethan said quickly, his tone pleading. "It's just, I've seen what money does to people, how it twists relationships, makes them transactional. You're the only person who's ever seen me for who I am, not what I have. I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose you." Clara's gaze softened, though her voice carried the weight of her hurt. "Do you know how small that made me feel? Like you didn't trust me enough to handle the truth?" "I know," Ethan admitted, his voice breaking slightly, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, asking for a second chance. Not to fix what's broken, but to rebuild something better." Clara looked away, her fingers tracing the grain of the wood beneath her. "I've spent so much time worrying about failing, Ethan. Failing my shop, failing my family. And when I found out about your life, it felt like everything I'd worked so hard for was a joke to you." "It was never a joke," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I've never admired anyone more than I admire you, Clara. Your strength, your resilience. You make me want to be better, to deserve you." The sincerity in his words struck a chord deep within her. For the first time, Clara saw not the wealthy entrepreneur, but the boy she used to know. The boy who climbed trees and shared secrets with her under the summer sun. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I don't know if we can go back to the way things were," she said honestly. "Maybe we don't have to," Ethan replied, his eyes searching hers. "Maybe we can start over." A small smile tugged at Clara's lips. Starting over sounds terrifying. Ethan smiled back, a hint of hope lighting his face. Terrifying can be good. It means it matters. For the first time in weeks, Clara felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. She didn't know if trust could be rebuilt in a day, but as she looked at Ethan, she realized she was willing to try. They sat together on that bench until the sun dipped below the horizon, their conversation weaving between past memories and tentative plans for the future. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. The possibility of something new. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. And for now, that was enough. The park was quiet, bathed in the soft hues of a late summer evening. Golden light filtered through the branches of the old oak tree, casting playful shadows on the ground. Clara walked along the familiar path, her steps slow and deliberate. Ethan had asked her to meet him here again, and though their relationship had grown over the past few months, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of curiosity and nerves. As she approached the clearing, Clara stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. The space around the oak tree had been transformed. Dozens of her favorite flowers, daisies, wildflowers, and soft lavender blooms, were arranged in elegant clusters, creating a vibrant tapestry of color. Tiny string lights hung from the tree's branches, their warm glow twinkling like stars. Ethan stood in the center of it all, his hands clasped in front of him. He wore a simple button-up shirt and slacks, his usual polished air softened by a nervous energy she hadn't seen before. "What is this?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she stepped closer. Ethan smiled, his gaze steady despite the hint of apprehension in his eyes. "It's something I've been planning for a while," he said. "I wanted this moment to be as beautiful as you deserve." Clara's cheeks flushed, but she managed a teasing grin. "You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Ethan." "Maybe," he admitted, his smile widening. "But this isn't just about the flowers or the lights." He took a deep breath, his expression growing serious. "Clara, when I first came back into your life, I thought I could just slip in and pretend nothing had changed. But it didn't take long for me to realize that everything about you, your strength, your kindness, your resilience, made me want to be a better man. You've shown me that life isn't about what you have, it's about who you share it with." Her heart raced as he continued, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You've spent so much time putting everyone else's dreams before your own, and I want to change that. I want to build a life with you. A life where your dreams matter just as much as anyone else's. A life where we face everything together, no matter how hard or messy it gets." Then, Ethan dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Clara's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring. A small sapphire, surrounded by tiny diamonds, sparkled in the fading sunlight. "Clara Evans," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you'll always come first, that your dreams will always be cherished, and that no matter what, we'll face everything together?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she stared at the man kneeling before her. In that moment, she saw not just the successful entrepreneur or the boy she used to know, but the man who had worked tirelessly to earn her trust, to mend what had been broken, and to show her that love could be a partnership of equals. She nodded, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Ethan, I'll marry you." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands steady despite the rush of relief and joy flooding his face. As he stood, Clara threw her arms around him, laughing through her tears. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the glow of the lights and the lingering warmth of the setting sun. For Clara, this wasn't just a proposal. It was a promise that they would face the future together, building something beautiful from the foundation of trust, honesty, and love they had worked so hard to restore. And for Ethan, It was the first step toward a life he had only dreamed of, a life where they could start anew, together. The months following their engagement were a whirlwind of new beginnings. Clara and Ethan, once bound by the past and divided by their differences, were now focused on building a future that reflected their shared values and dreams. One quiet evening, as they sat together in Clara's cozy apartment above Petal and Vine, Ethan brought up an idea that had been simmering in his mind. "You know," he said, swirling his coffee absent-mindedly, "your determination to keep this shop alive through everything. It's inspiring." Clara smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I didn't have much of a choice. When you have a dream, you fight for it." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "What if we could help others fight for their dreams, too? People like you, small business owners trying to make it work against the odds." Clara sat up, her curiosity piqued. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we create a program," Ethan said, his voice gaining momentum. "We could provide mentorship, resources, and financial support for small business owners in Crestford. There are so many people with big ideas who just need a little help to get started, or keep going." Clara's eyes lit up, like a bridge between the past and the future, helping people in our hometown grow their dreams. Ethan grinned. "Exactly. We could call it something like the Roots and Wings Initiative, to honor where we come from and where we're headed." Over the next few months, Clara and Ethan worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. Ethan leaned on his business acumen and network to secure funding and partnerships, while Clara used her experience as a small business owner to shape the program's priorities. Together, they poured their hearts into building a platform that would uplift others, just as they had uplifted each other. Back at Petal and Vine, Clara's shop became more than just a florist's haven. It transformed into a hub for the community. She hosted workshops on floral design, taught children about gardening, and even held networking events for local entrepreneurs. The shop's walls were lined with thank you notes and photos of smiling faces, a testament to the lives she had touched. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by the shop after a long day of meetings. He leaned against the counter, watching Clara teach a group of young children how to arrange flowers. The way her face lit up as she shared her passion filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. "You've created something incredible here," he said once the children had left. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and smiled at him. "We've created something incredible. You've been with me every step of the way." Ethan shook his head. "You give me too much credit. Stepping back from my corporate life was the easiest decision I've ever made. Seeing you thrive, seeing the way you bring people together, that's what matters." Their program, now fully operational, became a beacon of hope in Crestford. They offered grants to small businesses, held workshops on sustainable growth, and created a mentorship network for aspiring entrepreneurs. Clara often traveled back to Crestford to speak with program participants, sharing her story of resilience and the power of community. One day, after a particularly inspiring visit to Crestford, Clara turned to Ethan as they drove home. "Do you realize what we've done?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. Ethan glanced at her, a soft smile playing on his lips. "We've built a life together, one that matters." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Their journey hadn't been easy, but every struggle, every hard conversation, and every leap of faith had brought them to this moment. Together, they had created something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Clara's shop flourished as a cornerstone of the community, while Ethan found purpose in supporting others instead of chasing profits. Their shared dream became a legacy, a testament to the power of love, trust, and the courage to start anew. And as they drove through the quiet streets of Willowhaven, hand in hand, they both knew that this was just the beginning. The park had never looked more magical. Under the sprawling branches of the old oak tree, fairy lights twinkled like stars, casting a warm glow over the intimate gathering. Clara's flowers, wild and elegant arrangements of daisies, lavender, and soft white roses, adorned every corner, filling the air with a sweet, calming fragrance. Clara stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart racing as she clutched her bouquet of wildflowers. Her gown, simple yet stunning, seemed to shimmer under the soft light. Beside her, her closest friends adjusted her veil, whispering words of encouragement. She took a deep breath, her eyes lifting to the path ahead where Ethan waited for her. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his gaze fixed on Clara. He looked both nervous and awestruck, his usually composed demeanor softened by the emotion brimming in his eyes. For a moment, time seemed to stop as their eyes met, and Clara felt a wave of calm wash over her. The music began to play, a soft, melodic tune that carried through the evening air. As Clara stepped forward, each footfall felt significant, like a step toward a new chapter. Guests turned to watch, their faces glowing with warmth and joy. When she reached the altar, Ethan took her hands in his touch steady and comforting. The officiant smiled at them both, beginning the ceremony with a few words about love, resilience, and the beauty of second chances. Then, it was time for their vows. Ethan's voice was steady, though his words carried a depth of emotion that brought tears to Clara's eyes. "Clara," he began, "you've been my anchor and my inspiration. You've shown me what it means to live with purpose and to love without fear. From the moment we collided in the rain, I knew you were the person I'd been waiting to find again. I promised to stand beside you, to cherish your dreams as much as my own, and to never stop building a life with you." Clara smiled through her tears, her voice trembling as she began her own vows. "Ethan, you've taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about patience, honesty, and trust. You've shown me that even when life feels overwhelming, we can always find a way forward together. I promise to believe in you, in us, and in the life we're creating. With you, I've found not just love, but a partner in every sense of the word." As their vows came to an end, the officiant declared them husband and wife. Ethan leaned in, his hands cradling Clara's face as they shared their first kiss as a married couple. The crowd erupted into applause and cheers, the sound echoing through the park like a celebration of love itself. The reception was a reflection of Clara and Ethan's journey, simple, heartfelt, and full of life. Guests danced under the twinkling lights, laughter and music filling the night. Clara's floral arrangements were everywhere, a testament to her creativity and the love she poured into her craft. At one point, Clara and Ethan stood together at the edge of the celebration, watching their friends and family enjoy the evening. Ethan slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "This is perfect," Clara whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's everything I ever wanted," Ethan replied, kissing her temple. In the months that followed, Clara and Ethan continued to build their shared dream. Petal and Vine flourished, while their mentorship program in Crestford expanded, helping countless small business owners turn their dreams into reality. One day, while standing in her shop surrounded by flowers, Clara looked at Ethan and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Ethan nodded, his eyes full of pride and love. "And we're just getting started." Together, they faced each day with gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. From childhood friends to partners in life and love. As the sun set on another day, Clara and Ethan walked hand in hand through the park where it all began, their hearts full of hope for the future and the unshakable belief that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Clara and Ethan's story is a testament to the power of resilience, trust, and the beauty of second chances. It's a reminder that love, when nurtured with honesty and care, can transform lives and create something truly extraordinary. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If their story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to Vidy's Story for more inspiring tales of love, hope, and perseverance. Until next time, thank you for joining us on Clara and Ethan's heartfelt journey. Their story reminds us that true love is built on trust, honesty, and a shared commitment to each other's dreams. If their journey touched your heart, please like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of love, hope, and second chances. Your support means so much to us. See you next time.